everybody. So thanks for dealing with our little bit of technical difficulties that we had at the top of the stream there, but we are back up and we are good to go. So once again, we are the At-Home Artist Project. That was Hometown Renegade by the playwright Mia King. So now we'd like to open up the comment stream. If you've got comments for us, you got comments, questions for any of our artists, please just drop them into the chat and we will read them and answer them live here. The first one that I have is actually for Kevin. So Kevin is our director here this week, and he's got a little bit of a background in technology and theater. So Kevin, how was this experience for you? And can you just talk about, I guess your background and how you found this process?
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about this platform and this process that the At-Home Artist Project is experimenting with is the fact that as soon as you introduce a camera into the mix, you start to introduce questions about what makes it theater as opposed to film. And I think for this week, some of the main pieces that we're trying to play around with was whether we could create a sense of shared space between the performers, despite the fact that they were performing in totally distinct locations, while also making sure that we avoid kind of the Brady Bunch effect. And so with those two goals in mind, we were really trying to find different ways that we could use the performances, the different motions of the actors, and exploring those spaces to create a sense of shared space, which I think is so essential for what theater is. And so since most of the time my past work had been incorporating technology into a theatrical space, this was kind of the inverse of that. And so it was a lot of fun to play around.
Excellent. Great. So I have a question also for our playwrights. Let's start with Nikki and then we'll go to Maya. But Nikki, what led you to create this work, or why do you write this?
Well, it's funny. I was listening to this podcast. I wrote this about a year ago. And the podcast, I think, is called Twice Removed, which is about, I think it had like 6 episodes, and it was about connecting people with like distant ancestors through like generations. And the last episode they did was about this 23andMe test that was given to this 94-year-old man as a birthday gift by his grandchildren. And because he's 94 and not up with technology, his granddaughter was taking care of all the account and stuff. And she gets this email saying that 23andMe is now doing this thing where they're connecting people where they have overlapping matches of like biological matches. And she got this email saying that hers was a paternal match for someone else who had also taken the test. And that brought up a lot of questions with the family. They were like, did you cheat on grandma? We thought you only were with grandma, and all this stuff. But it turns out, this man had known 2 women before he went off to World War II, had married one of them before he left, and didn't really know what happened to this other woman. And she ended up having this child and putting up for adoption. And she was adopted into another home with 2 other adoptive sisters. And the story goes that, she said, I've had a very good life. My foster family, adoptive family was very nice to me, and I don't want to impose on this man's family. But what had ended up happening was they had met, and she was part of like their family reunion. So I just thought it was like a really sweet story. And then I was doing this Love Drunk series with a company called Rain or Shine Productions last March, where you get 2 vintage photographs and you have to write a short piece based on that photograph as loosely or not loosely as you want. And it was this vintage photograph of a man by a body of water on a bench, kind of looking back over his shoulder. And I was just like, oh, that's Robert. And had thought about that podcast and thought I'd incorporate the 2 stories together.
Fantastic. Very cool. Mia?
Yeah, for this one, I wanted to put three themes together that I was really interested in. The first one was dealing with gentrification. The second one was taking over a family business, which is something that I think about a lot. And the third one is taking ownership of what is yours and what it means, and the different ways that we can basically take back what is ours, especially if it's something that's being taken from us, whether that's rightfully so or not. And I also really wanted the idea of a spectacle at the end to sort of challenge the boundaries that theater could make, like if you wanted to put it on stage.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, so we've got a question from Jersey coming from YouTube. He says, speaking of navigating the camera, how are the actors addressing the eye contact problem? He says, are there any actors that would like to speak to eye contact and working over a Zoom call?
I'll say a couple of things about that. We had an interesting kind of obstacle with ours because of the eye line of us sitting next to each other on the bench.
Are you able to hear him?
But also sometimes she was standing up. So it was finding the proper eye line so it looked proper on the camera. So it was a little bit more difficult than the last time. I did the last reading as well, and that one was more directly into the camera, and like we were just talking to each other that way. So it was definitely a different challenge and a lot of fun to figure out.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you, Zach. We've got Tammy says, nice job on the fresh donut sign. Lots of applause coming from Tammy. Geminice Scott says hi and smiley face. We had a question for Zach. He already spoke to this, but he said, how is this play different from the one that you did last week or 2 weeks ago? Because you were with us a couple weeks ago, and so I guess how has your experience changed? Do you have any more that you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 10-minute play process is a little bit different, or the short play process is a little bit different. The last piece was more of a full-length piece, and this process was a lot. There was only two of us this time too, so it was a lot of fun to just be able to connect with Kira in our little breakout rehearsal that we had, because we rehearsed both pieces simultaneously with our director. So it was pretty neat to be able to work with our director for like 30 minutes, and then the two of us split off into a room in a different Zoom session, and we worked together for like another 30 to 45 minutes, and then we got back with, it was I really liked it.
Cool. Thank you. All right. We have a comment from Laura. She says, I appreciated the use of visuals and movement. And Juliana says, it's a cool use of perspective. She says she felt like she was sitting between them on the bench, which is interesting because, in a theatrical sense, you'd never be able to get that close, right, with an audience. So it's a really cool feeling, and something that's interesting about this medium. A question coming in here. She says, "Is for the playwrights, is this the first time that you've both heard your plays read aloud? And how was it having read them over this medium?" Nikki, do you want to start?
Yes. I had heard this play before about a year ago, but haven't really worked on it since. So it's always really interesting to hear other actors perform and say the words that you wrote, because everyone has a different perspective and read on it. So that was really interesting. I've never done anything in a technical medium like this before. I write strictly for stage, not really written much film. So this was, again, how Kevin said, making it feel like it's a shared space and not like a film. So it was interesting to see how that all came together, but I felt like it went really well.
Cool.
I was able to choose my cast, and I'm grateful for Naya, Kenna, and Callie, who are all actors that I've known for a really long time, and I guess I've known them as people for a really long time too. So it was very I loved seeing them put their own stamp into the characters. And I could see, certain ways where, one of them would say something and I would say, oh, wow, yeah, that's, of course, that is how they would say that. And it was just really gratifying being able to see the personalities of these actors come through and blend with the characters that I wrote on the page. So that's something that I'm really glad that I got to see through this process.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'll open it up to you all on the call. Is there any discussion points, anything that you guys found really interesting working this way, or anything that
I think
you
it
want to
looks like
share,
there's
questions
one
for
more.
each other?
I think it looks like there's one more comment that just came through on the chat.
Oh, let's see. Oh, for Hometown Renegade. How did the performers get into the headspace of feeling like they were all participating in the same actions while all performing separately? Would anyone in Hometown Renegade like to speak to that? Maybe about like all the paper business and propage and stuff.
I'll take it for a second.
Yeah, you do your thing.
Okay. I think what was great, and Kevin helped with this a lot, is a lot of the blocking was very intentional. So everything that we were doing, or like, it was so specific that even if you kind of were taken out of it for a second, because like, I'm going to be honest, I could not see Naya or Kenna sometimes when we were talking. I was just kind of trusting, and we know each other well enough that I could be like, oh, I think this is what's going on. And you really have to listen. You literally have to listen. But the blocking was very helpful, and that it was very intentional. And it definitely, I think, drove whatever was going on in the scene forward.
Yeah, I'll also say something. I think the blocking did really help a lot. Just knowing where everything was for myself, and then also just setting up the environment for myself. I've got my hand sanitizer, I've got my keys. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, it's like you're really there. Cool. We've got a question from Jess. She says, for the playwrights and the director, after seeing this medium in action, do you have new or different ideas on what to write or produce, or different kinds of stories to tell? Mia, Nikki, Kevin?
Potentially.
Anyone?
Being able to see this, and this is something that I got from working on this play. I think that this play posed a nice challenge for Kevin as a director, because the first part of it is best presented on screen, because they're essentially like on a FaceTime or a Skype call. If that had been in a theater, it would have been a little more difficult to sort of show the fact that they were communicating virtually, but that showed best, on a video call. Whereas the second part of the play would definitely have played better, like physically in person, where all of them can be there at the same time. So those were two sort of dual, they kind of counteracted each other, and was a challenge. But going back to how that first part played the best as a video call, I actually have been having like the idea of like, what sort of a play could I create where it completely takes place over video chat? And then at that point, I'm not sure if it would be like theater or film, because my mind goes back to the movie Searching. I don't know if anybody has seen that, but it's a movie starring John Cho, where a lot of what's going on screen is sort of like a screen grab. So yeah, so these are all elements that are like coming into my mind. They haven't really formulated into an actual like storyline or characters that I would use quite yet, but that is how this process and seeing particularly the first part of my play like on screen, that's how it has influenced like me as I think about future work.
I would agree with Maya on that last bit, because I, as a playwright, think of my scripts are very relationship and character driven. So how the characters play and interact with each other are very important to the story. And I guess what this shows is that it doesn't have to be something that's physical. but yeah, kind of thinking there's a lot of companies and a lot of what's great about the theater community is that we are determined to continue to tell stories during this time. And so there are a lot of companies that have moved to this type of medium, or companies that have just sprouted out and decided to do this as well. So thinking maybe in the long term, in the next 2 or 3 months, if things stay as they are, to find stories that can happen in this medium a little more intuitively, but also know that it shouldn't hinder the story, because we clearly showed that it can still work in its kind of regular aspect. But I'm also struggling to figure out, is it theater then, or is this a completely different other form? Have we created a different form of storytelling, which is exciting, I guess. Well, it's fun to play around with.
Yeah, I think on my front, both of the plays provided really wonderful opportunities for really what I think of as kind of 3 different challenges, which hopefully made the stream really dynamic today as a result of that source material, where one of the pieces was a fairly static piece. One of them was the first half of Hometown Renegade was kind of hyper-realism in terms of the face call. And then the end of it was presented the challenge of that dynamic motion. And so I think all 3 of them actually worked really, really well in ways that when reading it on the page, certain parts might jump out as, oh, this one might work this better and this one might work better. But I think overall the final product was something that had a really nice flow and dynamic nature to it across both the plays. So that was really exciting to see. I think one of the things that comes to mind, and the cast did such a wonderful job of setting up environments and finding props and little pieces and those things around. And the at-home artist project staff pulled in lots of the digital effects and the setups. But I think there's a potential interesting area for exploration around if you can actually like mail physical props to everyone, or really kind of pull in that next level of communal interactions and pieces, and what does that start to look like when you can make a backdrop that actually stops from one person's and continues to the next, or any of those pieces. So directorially, that's where my mind jumps as new areas and interesting areas to explore as it becomes more established form.
Very cool. Very cool. Anyone else want to share their experience or share any thoughts before we wrap up? All right. Well, I will just say, leave it with please like and subscribe on our YouTube, and please support all of these artists and artists via the Actors Fund by purchasing tickets at the Eventbrite link below in the bit.ly. Thank you very, very much for joining us this week, and we'll be back next week. Please follow us on our socials for more information. But thank you all so much, and we will see you then.